Welcome to the Maybe Not So Great Books channel. You decide. This is lesson 2 of 14. Prices are the internet before the internet, from Basic Economics. A Common Sense Guide to the Economy, 5th edition, by Thomas Sowell.
It's good to be back. This is the big one.
Imagine you had to feed New York City tomorrow. Every type of food, every neighborhood, every restaurant and grocery store, no prices. Go.
That is genuinely the stuff of nightmares. I mean, just thinking about it gives me anxiety.
It really does. I want you to actually, stop and visualize the sheer sweaty palm panic of that. You're sitting in some command center, maybe in Midtown. It's 4 in the morning. You've got this massive map of the 5 boroughs in front of you. And in a few hours, 8 million people are going to wake up. And they're all going to be hungry.
And they're not just hungry for food. That's the thing. They're hungry for specific things. They have these constantly changing desires.
Exactly. You, right now, have to decide how many tons of avocados go to the Bronx versus, say, the Upper East Side. You have to somehow know if the hipsters in Williamsburg have suddenly decided oat milk is out and macadamia milk is in this week.
Because if you get it wrong, if you send the wrong milk, it just spoils. If you send truckload of steak to a mostly vegetarian neighborhood, it rots in a warehouse.
And the stakes are just incredibly high. I mean, if you send too much of something, you're literally destroying wealth. You're wasting all those resources, the fuel, the labor. But if you send too little...
Then you have riots, actual civil unrest. People do not handle hunger well.
Not at all. And it's not just the food itself. It's the logistics. Who drives the trucks? What's the most efficient route for them to take? You need to coordinate with, refrigeration mechanics to make sure the trucks don't break down. You need to coordinate with farmers in Mexico who don't speak a word of English.
And bakers in Brooklyn who might not speak Spanish. It's this impossibly complex web.
And here is the real kicker. The constraint that makes this whole thing just impossible. You can't use prices. You cannot look at a price tag and see, oh, that's expensive, so it must be scarce, or that's cheap, it must be abundant. You have to do this all by command. You have to be the dictator of breakfast.
It is a logistical impossibility. I mean, it's a computational problem so vast that even if you had the world's most powerful supercomputer, just the number of variables, the millions of shifting human desires every single second, it would just crash the system.
And yet, just look out the window. New York City gets fed every single day.
And usually before most of us have even had our first cup of coffee.
It happens so seamlessly. You walk into a bodega, you buy a bagel, you don't even for a second think about the absolute miracle that put it there.
Right.
So the question that really drives this whole deep dive is, if no one person is doing it, if there's no food czar of New York, what is doing it?
That is the fundamental question of economics, really. And the answer isn't a person, it's a mechanism. So the mission today, I think, is to understand that invisible operating system that solves that impossible problem every day.
And we are looking exclusively at Section 9, Lesson 2 of Thomas Sowell's Basic Economics. The core concept is right there in the title we just read. Prices are the internet before the internet.
I love that title. I think it frames the discussion perfectly. We're not doing the whole book today. We're not talking about banking or international trade or the history of money.
Right. We're laser focused on this one specific lesson.
Because arguably, if you get this one lesson, you understand 80% of economics. We're going to unpack why Sowell argues that prices are not just these arbitrary numbers that annoy you at the checkout counter. They are a worldwide web of communication.
A communication network that existed long before we had fiber optics or Wi-Fi or any of that.
Exactly. Prices are information. That's it. That's the key takeaway right there. They aren't obstacles, they're data packets.
Okay, let's unpack that. Because I think for most of us, when we see a price tag, we just see a cost. We see money leaving our wallet. It feels like a barrier between me and the thing I want.
Of course.
But you're saying, and Sowell is saying, we need to completely reframe that. We have to look at a price tag as a message?
It is a message. It's a signal wrapped in a number.
Yeah.
And to really get why that message is so important, we have to look at what happens when you don't have it. We have to look at a world where that food czar scenario was actually real.
And Sowell has this perfect story in chapter 2, right? Involving Mikhail Gorbachev.
Yes, the Gorbachev confusion. It's one of the best anecdotes in the book.
And it's important to set the stage. I mean, this isn't ancient history. We're talking about the late 20th century.
Right. You've got Mikhail Gorbachev, the last president of the Soviet Union, a nuclear superpower. This is a highly educated man, a lawyer, a career politician. He's not a stupid person by any measure. But he was raised in a system of what they called scientific management.
Scientific management, that sounds very official.
It sounds impressive, but it basically just means the belief that order requires orders. That for a society to function, there has to be a plan, and there has to be a planner.
So in his world, if there was bread on a shelf in Moscow, it's because some minister of bread signed a form 3 months ago telling a factory to make it.
Precisely. So Gorbachev goes to Britain. He's meeting with Margaret Thatcher, the prime minister. And he sees something that, in his entire worldview, just shouldn't exist.
He sees abundance.
He sees abundance. He sees working-class neighborhoods in London with butcher shops just full of meat. He sees grocery stores with shelves stacked with vegetables, bread, milk. And he's baffled.
He's looking for the strings. He's trying to figure out who the puppet master is.
Exactly. So he asks Thatcher this question that, to him, is perfectly logical, but to her, and to us now, it sounds almost absurd. He asks, how do you see to it that people get food?
Just let that question hang there for a second. How do you see to it? He's asking for the organizational chart. He assumes there must be a British equivalent of his Bureau of Food. Some minister of London food distribution sitting in an office sending out trucks.
Because in his mind, the only question that matters is who is in charge. If nobody's in charge, the result should be chaos. It should be starvation. And yet, he's looking at a population that is way better fed than his own citizens.
So what was Thatcher's answer?
Well, she didn't really have one. Or her answer was a negative. She essentially told him, I don't. Prices do that.
That's such a mic drop moment, isn't it? I don't. Prices do.
But just imagine how that lands for Gorbachev. It's like asking, who's flying this plane? And being told, oh, nobody. The plane flies itself. It's a collision of two completely different realities. Thatcher later wrote in her memoirs that this question revealed that Gorbachev had little understanding of economics.
And she didn't mean that as, like, an insult to his intelligence, right?
No, not at all. She meant that his entire paradigm, his whole way of seeing the world, was built on the idea that centralized control is the only way to get order. He couldn't conceive of a self-organizing system.
And here's the irony that Sowell points out, which makes this story so powerful. Just compare the two countries at the time. Britain is a small, rainy island. It's got a high population density. At the time of this conversation, Britain hadn't produced enough food to feed itself in over a century.
Right. Britain is resource poor, at least when it comes to agriculture. They have to rely heavily on imports. They have to coordinate with farmers in New Zealand, Canada, France, you name it.
Okay, now compare that to the Soviet Union.
The USSR was, geographically, the largest nation on Earth. It had arguably the richest endowment of natural resources on the planet. I mean, vast fertile lands in Ukraine, the breadbasket of Europe, huge energy reserves, a highly educated population of scientists and engineers. They had all the stuff.
But the people were starving.
Or waiting in line for hours for a loaf of bread that might run out before they got to the front. So you have this contrast. Britain, low resources, high standard of living. Soviet Union, high resources, low standard of living.
So Well's point is that the difference wasn't the stuff. It wasn't the resources. It was the mechanism.
It was the operating system. Thatcher had prices, Gorbachev had planners. And that brings us right back to your feeding New York problem. If Thatcher had tried to feed London by command, London would have starved in a week. The only reason it worked was this invisible system we call prices.
Okay, so let's get into the mechanics of this. We need to move beyond saying it's magic and really understand how it works. How does a number on a sticker actually feed a city? We've established that prices are messengers. So uses that exact metaphor.
He does. He says prices convey news. And sometimes, it's bad news.
And nobody likes bad news. Like when I look at real estate listings for a nice beach house.
That's the perfect example from the book. Everyone wants to live on the beach. It's beautiful, it's relaxing. But there is a very real physical limit to how much coastline exists in the world. It is scarce.
So the price goes through the roof.
Right. And that high price isn't just a greedy landlord trying to gouge you, though that might be part of his motivation. The price itself is a messenger telling you the truth about reality. It's saying, space is scarce here. There are way more people who want this than there is sand to hold them.
So the price is basically a do not enter sign for most people.
Or at least a think very carefully sign. It forces you to economize. It forces you to ask, do I really need this? Because if beachfront property costs the same as a shack in the desert, everyone would rush the beach and you'd just have chaos. The price rations the scarcity.
And on the flip side, if the price drops.
That's good news. That's a message of abundance or efficiency. It's telling you, hey, we figured out how to make this cheaper, or we found a huge new supply of it, so go ahead and use more.
So L breaks this all down into 3 specific functions that prices perform, all at the same time. I think we should go through these one by one because they're sort of the gears of the machine.
Absolutely. The 3 functions are rationing, incentives, and information.
Let's start with rationing. We just kind of touched on that with the beach house.
Correct. Rationing is the part that limits who gets the scarce goods. It's the unpleasant part, right? Nobody likes being priced out of something they want. But the alternative to rationing by price is almost always worse.
What is the alternative then?
Well, if you use government power to cap the price of that beach house at, say, $500 to make it fair, you don't magically create more beach houses. You just create a shortage. Now you've got 10,000 people all trying to rent 5 houses. So how do you decide who gets in?
You'd have to have a lottery or a waiting list that's years long.
Or it's based on political connections.
Or drives.
Or, who can wait in line the longest. Or just brute force. Rationing by price is simply the mechanism that aligns the demand with the actual available supply.
Okay, so function 1 is rationing. Function 2 is incentives. This one feels a little more positive.
Incentives are what tell producers what to do. If the price of that beach house is huge, what does a developer see?
They see a giant pile of money to be made. They try to build more beach houses. Or, since you can't make more land, maybe they build taller condos on the existing beach to fit more people.
Exactly. The high price is like a giant flashing green light that says, build here, profit to be made. It draws resources, bricks, steel, labor to the place where people want them most, as demonstrated by their willingness to pay.
So without that high price signal, the developer might just build condos in the middle of nowhere where nobody wants to live.
Yes. The price acts as a magnet for resources, pulling them toward what society values.
And then there's function 3, information. This is the internet part of the title. This is where I want to slow down and really trace the path, because Sowell's example here, the whole dairy chain, is just brilliant.
It's a classic. It's a perfect example of a chain reaction, of how a little ripple in one part of the economic pond travels across the entire thing.
So let's set it up. Imagine a new trend starts. Let's say a big study comes out that says eating cheese prevents aging. Or maybe a huge fast food chain launches a mega cheeseburger that just goes viral on TikTok.
Oh, okay, so for whatever reason, suddenly millions of people want way more cheese. Demand just skyrockets.
Step 1, the supermarkets start running out of cheese.
Right. And because the shelves are emptying, the price of cheese starts to rise. That's rationing kicking in. But now look at the incentive. The cheese manufacturers, they see that price spike. They see their profit margin widening, and they say, we need to make more cheese right now.
But you can't just make cheese out of thin air. You need milk.
Exactly. And there's only a finite amount of milk produced every day. You can't just 3D print a cow overnight. So the cheese manufacturers have to get that milk from somewhere.
They have to go to the dairy farmers.
And they bid for it. They go to the farmer and say, hey, we'll pay you $2 a gallon for your raw milk.
Now let's picture the dairy farmer. He was maybe selling some of his milk to the cheese guys for $1.50, some to the ice cream guys for $1.50, and some to the yogurt guys for $1.50.
Right. He was indifferent. But now the cheese guys are offering $2. So what does the farmer do?
Purely out of his own self-interest, he sells all his milk to the cheese factory.
Correct. He shifts his supply. Now here's the ripple. The ice cream maker and the yogurt maker, they call the farmer and say, hey, where's our milk shipment? And the farmer says, sorry, the cheese guys bought it all.
So the supply of milk available for making ice cream just tightened up?
Which means the ice cream maker now has to pay more if they want to get any milk at all. Their costs go up. And finally, what happens to the price of a tub of ice cream at your local grocery store?
It goes up.
It goes up. Now let's pause here, because this is the magic part. This is the information part. Think about the ice cream manufacturer in, say, Omaha, Nebraska. Does he have any idea about that viral TikTok cheeseburger?
Probably not. He's busy worrying about vanilla extract and sugar prices.
Does he know about the scientific study on cheese and aging?
Definitely not.
Does the dairy farmer himself know why the cheese factory is suddenly desperate for more milk?
No, he just knows their check cleared.
Exactly. The ice cream manufacturer has absolutely no idea that teenagers in Chicago are eating more cheddar. But he just raised the price of his mint chip ice cream. Why?
Because the price of milk transmitted all that information to him?
That is the aha moment. The price of milk condensed all of that complex social information. The TikTok trends, the viral marketing, the scientific studies, the dietary shifts of millions of people into one single solitary signal. Milk is more expensive.
And that one number told him everything he needed to know. It told him, society has collectively decided that milk is more valuable as cheese right now than it is as ice cream. Adjust accordingly.
Precisely. The price system economized on knowledge. It's a beautiful phrase. It allowed the farmer, the cheesemaker, and the ice cream maker to act intelligently and in coordination with millions of strangers without knowing a single thing about them or their motivations.
That really is like a primitive internet. It's transmitting these little data packets of demand is high through the whole network.
It is a decentralized web of communication.
Yeah.
And it coordinates the entire economy. The ice cream lover sees the price of ice cream went up, maybe decides to buy a popsicle instead.
Yeah.
They have just voluntarily stepped aside to leave more milk for the cheese lover, and no one had to order them to do it.
It's an incredible miracle of coordination. But, and this is where it gets really dark.
Yeah.
What happens when you cut the wires? What happens when you decide, you know what, these fluctuating prices are annoying, let's just set them ourselves?
When you kill the messenger, you get chaos.
Yeah.
You get a system that is deaf, dumb, and blind.
Mm-hmm.
And Sowell gives us this vivid, almost tragic example of this from the Soviet Union, and it involves moleskins.
Moleskins, like from the little furry animals.
Yes, exactly.
All right.
So let's unplug the router for a second and look at the Soviet planned economy.
Yeah.
They didn't have market prices. They had planners. These were men in offices in Moscow who decided what everything should cost. And at one point, the government decided they needed more furs for coats and hats.
Okay, so they need to incentivize hunting.
Right, so the planners set a very high fixed price to be paid for moleskins. They basically told the hunters, we will pay you top dollar for every single skin you bring in.
Which implies that incentives still work even in a socialist system, right? People are people.
Oh, absolutely. People respond to incentives everywhere. That's just human nature. And the hunters responded perfectly. They went out and trapped tons and tons of moles. They brought them to the state distribution centers.
Success. The plan worked perfectly.
Well, stage one of the plan was a success. But here is where the feedback loop completely breaks. In a market economy, if hunters brought in way more skins than the coat factories could possibly use, what would happen?
The factories would just stop buying. Or they'd say, look, we're full up. We'll give you 10 cents a skin now. The price would crash instantly.
Instantly. Real-time feedback. But in the Soviet Union, the price was fixed by the government. It wasn't set by the factory manager who saw his warehouse was full. It was set by a committee in Moscow. So the hunters kept bringing them in because the price was still high. But the factories wouldn't take them because they were already overflowing.
So, what happened to all the skins?
They rotted. Sowell describes them literally rotting in warehouses. Millions and millions of rubles worth of fur just wasted, just decaying piles of economic failure.
And the obvious question is, why didn't they just lower the price? If the warehouses are full, stop paying hunters top dollar. It seems so simple.
It does seem incredibly simple. And the Ministry of Light Industry, the people in charge of the coats, they actually requested a price change. They sent a memo. But here's the bureaucratic nightmare at work. The pricing authority, this agency responsible for setting all the prices, called Goskompson, was too busy.
Too busy to save millions of rubles from rotting.
They were completely swamped. And Sowell cites this staggering number, and I really want you to try and visualize this. The pricing officials at Goskompson had to track and set 24 million prices.
24 million.
Imagine that spreadsheet. 24 million different items. From moleskins to tractors to a size 7 shoe versus a size 8 shoe to different grades of steel to the price of a ticket to the ballet. Every single thing in a continental economy had to have a price tag approved by this one central committee.
Let's just try to do the math on that. If you spent just 1 second, one single second, analyzing each price.
It would take you about 277 days working around the clock just to read the list once. And by the time you finished, the conditions for the very first item on the list would have changed completely.
It's physically impossible. It's computationally impossible. Even if you had a building full of thousands of people, they just couldn't keep up with reality.
Exactly. The scale problem is insurmountable. So the request to lower the price of moleskins just sat in an inbox somewhere, buried under requests for steel prices and wheat prices and everything else. And while it sat there, the furs rotted away.
This connects directly back to that feeding New York thought experiment. The Soviet planners were trying to be the central brain of the entire economy. They were trying to be the supercomputer.
And they failed. And not because they were stupid. Sowell is very clear about this. These were not dumb people. They were highly intelligent people tasked with an impossible job. Because in a market economy, nobody tracks 24 million prices.
Right. The shopkeeper at the corner store, he tracks maybe a few hundred. The dairy farmer tracks the price of milk and feed and a few other things.
The knowledge is distributed. It's decentralized. Each person only needs to manage their tiny little node on the network. The system as a whole manages the whole thing. When you try to centralize all that, when you try to force all that data through one single bottleneck Gauss-Thompson, you get rotting moleskins, you get waste, you get people wearing shoes that don't fit because the planner approved the wrong ratio of sizes.
You know, it's interesting because this leads us to the deeper philosophy behind Sowell's argument. This isn't just about efficiency or logistics, it's about the nature of knowledge itself.
Yes, this is where Sowell is drawing heavily on Friedrich Hayek, another Nobel Prize-winning economist. This brings us to what's called the knowledge problem.
Which sounds like the title of a spy thriller, but it's actually a pretty profound philosophy.
It is. The core philosophy is that knowledge is the scarcest resource of all. But we have to make a distinction between two types of knowledge.
Okay, what are they?
First, there's scientific knowledge. This is the kind of stuff you can write down in a textbook. The chemical formula for steel, the principles of aerodynamics. A central planner can possess this knowledge. You can hire experts, read books.
Right. So the Soviet Union had great scientists. They put the first satellite in space, Sputnik.
Exactly. They were not lacking in scientific knowledge. But the second type of knowledge is what Hayek called specific knowledge of time and place.
Can you give me an example of that?
Specific knowledge is, machine number 4 in the Ohio factory is overheating today and it needs a break. Or, the traffic on the George Washington Bridge is totally backed up, so the delivery truck is going to be 2 hours late. Or, you know what, the people in this neighborhood in Brooklyn are getting tired of rye bread and they're starting to ask for sourdough.
It's the fleeting, messy, local details of day-to-day reality.
Precisely. And that kind of knowledge is dispersed. It exists in millions of tiny fragments in the minds of millions of individual people. No single person, no committee, no supercomputer could ever possess all of it at once.
So, the food czar, from our opening example. He might know the nutritional requirements of a human being, that's scientific knowledge, but he can't possibly know that the specific truck driver for the Bronx delivery is sick today. That's specific knowledge.
Exactly. And the market system works because the decision-making is left to the people who possess that specific knowledge. The truck driver calls a sub, the bakery manager notices people are buying more sourdough, so he orders less rye. They adjust instantly on the ground.
This brings us back to the title. Sowell calls prices the internet before the internet. And when you think about it, think about the shirt you're wearing right now. Where was it made?
Let's say Malaysia.
Okay, so a cotton farmer, maybe in India, grew the cotton. A shipping company moved it. A weaver in Malaysia turned it into cloth. A factory sewed it into a shirt. Then another shipper brought it here.
And then I walked into a store and bought it.
You effectively communicated with that cotton farmer in India. Your purchase, your $10 or $20, sent a tiny signal all the way back through that chain that said, keep growing cotton like this. But you don't know him. You don't know his language, his religion, his politics. You might hate each other if you ever met.
But the price system coordinated our actions so that we cooperated peacefully. That is the profound insight. The market coordinates cooperation among total strangers.
Sowell has this great quote, "Prices formed a worldwide web of communication long before there was an internet." It really, really makes you look at a simple price tag differently. It's not just a cost, it's a connection.
It connects you to the reality of the entire world, to the scarcity of the cotton, the cost of the weaver's labor, the price of the fuel for the ship. All of that is wrapped up in that one number, 19.99.
So we've established that this system is this incredible miracle. It feeds cities, it prevents rotting moleskins, it coordinates strangers. But we have to pivot to the modern day. Because, we aren't living in the Soviet Union. We don't have a Gauss-Thompson setting the price of our shoes.
That's true. But that doesn't mean we let prices do their job everywhere. So, Will points to a very specific and very large modern example where we have effectively killed the messenger.
Healthcare.
Healthcare is a classic example of a modern market where the price signal has been almost completely severed.
And that's because of insurance?
It's because of insurance and government subsidies, yeah?
Yeah.
Think about it. When you go to the doctor, do you ask what the price of an MRI is before you get it?
Never. I just ask, is it covered?
Exactly. You don't care if the MRI costs $500 or $5,000 because your copay is $20 either way. The price signal, The bad news that a whole bunch of scarce resources are being used is completely hidden from you, the consumer.
So I end up consuming more healthcare than I would if I had to pay the real price out of pocket.
Right. The rationing function's broken. And then on the provider side, if the hospital knows the patient isn't paying the full bill and the insurance company just pays some negotiated rate, the incentive to lower prices to become more efficient, it just evaporates.
The messenger has been silenced.
And when the messenger is silenced, you get what we have. Costs that spiral out of control. You get the same kind of inefficiencies as the Soviet system, just in a different form. We have great technology, unlike the Soviets, but the economic mechanism is distorted because that crucial information function of prices has been destroyed.
This raises a really critical question, though. We're painting a very pro-market picture here. Does this always work? Is the market perfect? Is the price mechanism infallible?
No. Absolutely not. And so Pinjol is very honest about this, especially in Section 7. He issues a clear warning. Prices are a tool, and like any tool, they need the right environment to function properly.
So what are the conditions for it to work?
Well, condition number one is competition. Prices only work as true messengers if you have choices. If there's only one internet provider in your entire town.
Then the price they charge isn't a signal of scarcity. It's a signal of, I can charge whatever I want because you have nowhere else to go.
Exactly. That's a monopoly. In a monopoly situation, prices systematically mislead. They reflect power, not the underlying reality of resource scarcity. Sowell's clear that if you don't have competition, the whole price mechanism breaks down.
What about the classic example like pollution?
That's the other big one, externalities. If a factory produces cheap steel, but in the process dumps toxic sludge into the river, the price of the steel is low. But the cost to society, the dead fish, the polluted water, is very high.
So the price tag is lying. It says the steel is cheap, but it's leaving out the massive cost of the sludge cleanup.
Correct. In that case, the information is incomplete. The messenger is leaving out a crucial part of the news. So Sowell isn't a market utopian. He's not saying markets are magic in every single scenario. He's saying that when prices capture the full costs and when there's robust competition, they are the most efficient operating system for an economy ever discovered.
So prices are a powerful tool, but you need to keep the tool sharp. You need to enforce competition and maybe find ways to account for those externalities, like pollution.
Precisely.
Okay, I want to pivot to the final segment here, and this is where I want to push back a little bit. I want to play devil's advocate. We identified this in the outline as the digital planner.
Ah, yes. The big modern question.
We've been, bashing the Soviet Union for trying to do this with pen and paper and landline phones. We said they failed because they couldn't possibly track 24 million prices. Fine, I accept that. But it's 2026. We have artificial intelligence, we have supercomputers, we have deep learning algorithms.
Right. The argument goes, could we build a digital Gauss constant? Could an AI actually run the economy better than the messy system of prices?
I mean, just look at a company like Amazon or Walmart. Amazon essentially runs a planned economy internally, don't they?
That is the strongest argument for the digital planner, for sure.
Think about it. When I order a toothbrush on Amazon, there isn't some internal auction where the warehouse in Nevada bids against the warehouse in Texas to see who will ship it to me. An algorithm just decides. It issues a command, move box A to truck B. It's a command economy the size of a small nation.
It is. It's a logistical marvel.
So if Jeff Bezos can run a command economy for hundreds of millions of products using algorithms, why can't the president do it for the whole country? Why can't we just have Amazon for everything and get rid of prices?
It is a very, very tempting thought. No more messy markets, no more price fluctuations, just a perfectly optimized algorithm feeding everyone what they need. But Hayek, and by extension Sowell, would argue that this misses the fundamental point. It misses the distinction between processing data and generating data.
Okay, explain that difference.
Amazon's algorithm works incredibly efficiently, yes. But Amazon sits inside a larger market economy.
What do you mean by that?
I mean that the prices Amazon pays for its trucks, for its diesel fuel, for its cardboard boxes, for the electricity in its warehouses, and for the labor of its workers, all of those prices are set by the competitive market that exists outside of Amazon.
So the algorithm is using those external market prices as its inputs.
Exactly. The algorithm knows that it's cheaper to ship something via truck than by plane, because the market prices of gasoline and pilot wages tell it so. If you remove that market outside of Amazon, if the government just owned all the fuel, all the trucks, and all the labor, how would the algorithm know what anything actually costs?
It wouldn't. It would just have historical data, I guess.
It would be flying completely blind. It wouldn't know if cardboard was suddenly more scarce than plastic because there would be no price signal to tell it. So, in a way, Amazon is cheating. It's using the rich data generated by the market to run its internal plan.
That makes a lot of sense. But there's a second part to the argument, right? The incentive argument.
And this, to me, is the real kill shot for the idea of digital socialism.
Let's go back to our Soviet factory manager. In that system, why did the manager lie to the planners?
Because he wanted to be safe. He would say, I need 10,000 screws, even when he only really needed 5,000 just in case. He was hoarding resources to protect himself. Right. Now, give that same manager a supercomputer. Give him a fancy AI interface. If his personal incentive is still just to be safe and keep his job, what data does he feed into the AI?
He still feeds it the lie. He tells the AI, my factory needs 10,000 screws.
Exactly. Garbage in, garbage out. The AI will process that lie at the speed of light and brilliantly allocate him 10,000 screws, wasting resources even faster and more efficiently than the old pen and paper bureaucrat could have dreamed of.
But at Amazon?
At Amazon, if a warehouse manager is consistently lying or is inefficient and wasting resources, what happens?
Well, the stock price drops eventually. He gets fired. Amazon starts losing money to a Walmart or Target.
The profit and loss discipline, the fear of going broke, of going out of business, forces the actors in the system to be honest, or at least to act efficiently. It forces them to generate accurate data for the system.
So without that threat of bankruptcy, which a government agency doesn't have, you can never really trust the data being fed into the system.
Precisely. Sowell would argue that the knowledge problem isn't just a computation problem. It's not about how fast you can do the math, it's a motivation problem. It's about having a system that forces millions of people to reveal the truth about what they want and what they can do.
So a real debate is, can technology overcome the knowledge problem? Or is the problem actually baked into human nature and our response to incentives?
And so it would come down firmly on the side of incentives. You can upgrade the technology all you want, but the human operating system, our fundamental response to incentives, stays the same. You can't code your way out of human nature.
That is a fascinating way to put all of that. The technology changes, but the underlying economic laws remain the same.
Exactly.
Okay, let's try to wrap this up. We have covered a massive amount of ground today.
We really have.
We started with the sheer panic of the food czar trying to feed New York City without any prices.
An absolute nightmare scenario.
We looked at Gorbachev being completely baffled by a simple British supermarket. We unpacked the decoding of prices, how they act as messengers of news.
Right. Bad news about scarcity. Good news about abundance.
We traced the entire dairy chain, the internet of the economy that connects a cheese eater in one city to a farmer hundreds of miles away.
That beautiful ripple effect of information.
We saw the tragedy of the rotting moleskins, what happens when you silence the messenger, and we just debated the digital planner why even a super smart AI can't fix a system with bad incentives.
And we touched on the important warnings, that prices need competition and need to reflect real costs to tell the truth.
So what is the final takeaway for the listener when they walk into a grocery store tomorrow morning?
I want you to walk into that store and just stop for a second in the produce section. Just look around. You'll see avocados from Mexico sitting right next to cheese from France, next to coffee from Colombia.
All fresh, all available, all right there.
Don't take it for granted. I want you to realize that what you're looking at is a miracle of coordination. Millions of people who do not know each other, who don't speak the same language, who have never met, all worked in concert to put that specific avocado in your hand for $2.
And nobody was in charge.
Nobody was in charge. The prices did it.
It really is the invisible operating system of our lives.
It is. And understanding it, I think, makes the world look a lot less chaotic and a lot more fascinating.
That was Lesson 2 of 14 on Basic Economics, a common sense guide to the economy, 5th edition. Subscribe for the full series. If you haven't seen our debate overview of the whole book, check that out, link in the description. Thanks for being here. See you next time.